Ever think about that picture of the American dream? You know, the one we all grew up with. White picket fence, kids playing out in the streets, everyone feeling safe.
Yeah, sure.
Well, what if that dream turned into a total nightmare?
I mean, that's kind of a scary thought.
That's basically what happened in this place called Love Canal.
Love to know.
Yeah, it was this seemingly normal neighborhood in Niagara Falls, New York, back in the late 1970s.
Okay, I've heard of Love Canal. It's pretty infamous.
Yeah, for good reason. The community was built right on top of a huge chemical waste dump.
Oh, wow. Like, how big are we talking?
Massive, over 20,000 tons of toxic waste.
Right under their houses.
Yeah, you had families living there, raising kids, totally clueless about the danger underneath.
That's
It
awful.
really is. Schools, parks, you name it, everything looked normal, like a thriving community. But then the health problems started showing up.
I bet. What kind of problems?
Serious stuff. Birth defects, miscarriages, cancer, all sorts of strange illnesses.
That's a nightmare scenario.
Absolutely. And the worst part is that the company responsible, Hooker Chemical, they knew about the risks.
They did.
Oh, yeah. They even had studies showing that chemicals could contaminate the groundwater.
But they didn't warn anyone.
Nope. They kept it all quiet. Profits
That's...
over people, right? They even sold the land to the school board for, get this, $1.
Seriously, $1.
$1. And the deed even mentioned the buried waste.
That's unbelievable. So how did this all come out?
Well, it took a very determined woman named Lois Gibbs. She was a housewife, a mom. Her son started having seizures, and her daughter developed a blood disorder.
So she started investigating.
At first, she was just worried about her own kids, naturally. But as she dug deeper, she realized how widespread the problem was. Tons of families in Love Canal were going through the same thing.
Wow.
She knew she had to do something.
So she became like an activist.
Exactly. She went door to door, organized meetings, gathered data on everyone's health issues. She basically forced the authorities to finally pay attention.
Good for her. Sounds like a real fighter.
She was. But the government, they were really slow to respond at first. Lots of bureaucracy, debates about the science, and no one wanting to take responsibility.
That's frustrating.
It was. Took years of pressure from Lois and the Love Canal residents to get any real action.
So what changed things?
A chromosome study. They did it on the residents, and it showed a really high rate of abnormalities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It didn't conclusively prove the chemicals were causing the health problems, but it was a huge red flag.
I bet that was scary for those families.
It was a terrifying time. The study added so much weight to their claims, it put huge pressure on Hooker Chemical and the government.
So what happened next? What did Lois do?
Well, the residents were desperate. They'd been asking for relocation for years, but no one was listening. So Lois decided to take drastic action.
Drastic? What do you mean?
She, along with some other residents, took 2 EPA officials hostage.
Hostage. Wow.
This is a desperate move.
Yeah. But did it work? It became a major turning point in the whole Love Canal crisis. I can see how that would get everyone's attention.
Absolutely. It forced the government to deal with the issue head on. And this was during President Carter's re-election campaign, too.
Oh, so they really couldn't ignore it.
Exactly. They couldn't have a hostage crisis playing out on national TV.
That's incredible. Just goes to show the power of grassroots activism, right? Ordinary people coming together to demand change.
Absolutely. And that's just the beginning of the story. We'll get into the aftermath of the hostage situation and the evacuation of Love Canal after a quick break. So those hostages, that must put some serious pressure on the government. What happened after that?
Yeah, you can imagine. With all that attention on Love Canal, President Carter had to do something.
Makes sense.
He ended up relocating hundreds of families and declared Love Canal a federal disaster area.
Wow, that's big.
Yeah.
Must have been a huge win for Lois Gibbs and everyone living there.
It was a big moment for sure. The government finally admitted how bad it was and actually started moving people out.
But even with relocation, all that trauma, the health problems, that doesn't just go away.
You're right. Living Love Canal didn't mean the fight was over.
I bet.
Residents still had to deal with years of legal battles against Hooker Chemical. They wanted compensation for what they'd been through, losing their homes, their health.
It's hard to even imagine the emotional toll. It's not just about money, it's about everything they lost.
Absolutely. It was devastating. And they didn't just want money, they wanted someone to be held accountable. They wanted to make sure this never happened again to anyone.
And there was one resident, Luella Kenny. She really took that fight to the top, didn't she?
She did. Luella lost her son to kidney failure.
Oh, that's so sad.
She was convinced it was because of the chemicals in Love Canal. And she was determined to make sure no other family went through the same thing.
It's incredible how she stood up to those in power. I remember reading about her confrontation with Armand Hammer, the CEO of Occidental Petroleum. Hooker Chemical was a subsidiary of theirs, right?
Yeah.
What a brave woman.
It was like David and Goliath. This grieving mother, she went all the way to Los Angeles to confront one of the most powerful men in the country.
Wow.
She spoke at their shareholder meeting, directly challenged Hammer, told him they had to take responsibility for Love Canal.
That must have taken so much courage.
It did. Luella Kenny's story shows what one person can do, how powerful individual action can be. She refused to stay silent. She stood up to corporate power and demanded justice for her son and for everyone in Love Canal.
What did Hammer even say to that? How did he react?
Well, he denied any wrongdoing, said Hooker Chemical and Occidental Petroleum hadn't done anything wrong. But Kenny being there at that meeting, it brought so much attention to Love Canal, put a lot of pressure on the company. It was a turning point in making corporations accountable for their actions.
So Love Canal didn't just spark activism and lawsuits, it actually changed environmental policy, right?
Definitely. It was a wake-up call for the entire country, showed everyone how dangerous toxic waste can be and how the government wasn't doing enough to protect people from it.
It must have been a major moment for the environmental movement.
It was. The Love Canal disaster led to the creation of the Superfund program in 1980.
For our listeners who might not know, what exactly is the Superfund program?
It's a federal program that cleans up the most contaminated land in the country, and it makes the polluters pay for it.
So Love Canal, as awful as it was, it actually led to something good. This program's still around today, cleaning up the toxic sites.
Exactly. The Superfund program has cleaned up thousands of sites all across the country. It's protecting people's health and the environment. And it all started because of what happened in Love Canal.
So the legacy of Love Canal is huge. But the story doesn't end there, does it? Even after the evacuations, the court battles, the Superfund, it feels like the shadow of this disaster is still hanging around.
That's true. They declared the site clean, families started moving back to some areas, but then there were reports of strange smells, some tar-like stuff seeping into basements.
Oh, no.
It's worrying, for sure. Makes you wonder if they really cleaned it up properly, if those efforts were enough.
It makes you wonder if we can ever truly escape the consequences of things like this.
It's a sobering thought. Love Canal shows us that pollution can last for generations. The fight for environmental justice, it never really ends.
Yeah, it really makes you think, about how we try to fix things.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are these consequences that we just don't see coming.
Exactly. It's like Love Canal isn't just something from the past. It's like a warning sign for what we're dealing with today. Climate change, pollution, all this new technology, it all raises these big questions about what's right and wrong, what's safe for the environment.
It can feel overwhelming, right? Like, what can we actually do about it? I mean, we're just regular people.
Well, for one thing, we can't just sit back and do nothing.
Yeah.
We need to be informed, right? We got to understand the issues so we can hold our leaders and those big companies accountable for their actions.
So, like, being more active in our communities.
Exactly. And supporting those groups that are fighting for the environment, pushing for stronger laws. The people in Love Canal, they were totally blindsided. Nobody told them about the toxic waste under their homes.
It's scary to think about.
It is. But we have so much information available now more than ever. We can actually look into companies, see how they treat the environment. We can push for more transparency from the government, demand better protection for everyone.
So being informed and making smart choices is key.
Yeah. And never underestimate what we can do when we work together. The Love Canal residents, they accomplished so much because they united and they spoke up. They demanded change.
And that's happening all over the world today, right?
Yeah.
People coming together to fight for environmental justice.
That's right. It's inspiring to see. Even when it feels like an uphill battle, ordinary people can make a huge difference. The Love Canal story proves that. It shows us that we have to speak truth to power, fight for what's right no matter what.
It's powerful stuff. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Love Canal, I hope our listeners are feeling that mix of, wow, this is serious, but also, hey, we can do something about it.
Yeah.
We can learn from what happened and try to prevent these things from happening again.
Right. I remember fighting for the environment. It's not a one-time thing.
Right.
It's a constant effort, and every voice matters. Every action we take can add up to something bigger.
Absolutely. Well, we've just scratched the surface of this topic, but hopefully this has made you curious to learn more. We've got some great resources in the show notes if you want to go deeper into the Love Canal story and look into these bigger issues like environmental justice and holding corporations accountable.
And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the Deep Dive. We're always exploring these fascinating stories from history and seeing what lessons we can learn from them. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.